Hi, welcome to Module 4.4, Awarding Contracts. In this module, you get to deliver good news to one of your bidders and take an important step towards construction. But we're also going to discuss how to work with your unsuccessful bidders to make sure you aren't negatively impacting future projects you'll undertake. As always, we'd like to thank Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation for their support of this course through the project Community-Led Design for Specialized Housing in the North. We would also like to acknowledge the partnership that makes this certificate possible between Together Design Lab, Nishnawbe Aski Nation, the Faculty of Community Services at Toronto Metropolitan University, and WASA Distance Education Center. This module wraps up the tendering process and brings us into construction, where your role will change into management and monitoring. In this module, we'll go over what a letter of acceptance is, when negotiations are appropriate, some of the post-bid documents that you'll require in order to move to contract, and in the rare case, what happens when your successful bidder refuses to sign a contract. Well, you've done it. You've chosen a successful bidder. Now what? I want to focus on three main elements that we're going to talk about in this module. How you provide notice to the successful bidder, when negotiations are appropriate, what that looks like, and maybe why negotiations aren't appropriate, and working with unsuccessful bidders, which is an often overlooked, but I think really important part of this process to make sure not just that you have success with this building project, but with building projects in the future as well. So once you've selected a bidder, you're going to want to be in touch with them as soon as possible. Why not? You want to deliver the good news, and you also want to take every step you can to get towards construction. And while that contact and bringing the good news can kind of take any form, there is still a best practice here, which is a letter of acceptance. And really, if we're going to continue to follow the legal process that we've set out throughout tendering and procurement, this formal letter is the way to go. A letter of acceptance, as I said, is just a formal letter that has, some basic critical information on it. And the only kind of rare thing that you might see that goes away from a form here is if you're accepting a proposed alternative. And we talked about alternatives a couple modules ago, and that's where the bidder proposes something outside of the project you've set out as a reasonable alternative that they think can make the project better. The point of this letter is just to keep the project moving. It's to keep the process that you've outlaid in your tender package flowing. And so the information that you see on screen here, the date, the name, the award date, things like that, it's pretty standard, and it's just about keeping the process going. On screen now, we offer just a couple of examples, and these files are available to you as well, of what that letter could look like to your successful bidder. Now, the process I've explained to you so far is focused on the simplest form, which is likely going to be the one you see if you've used a request for tender, or the bid package that has come forward is pretty straightforward because you knew most of the details about the project going in. However, in some processes, most commonly coming out of an RFP that has been issued as a part of a design build process, there may still be room, or there may be necessary negotiation, because often with a design build process, there's some flexibility built into the bidder's package because not all the details of the project have been worked out. And so at this stage, what you would have issued instead of a letter of acceptance is a letter of intent, and you would enter into the negotiations with that contractor as a way of meeting the next steps towards the contract. Still, we're just following the process that was outlined in the tender package. I offer this slide here once again, and I know you've seen it many, many times with me before, just as a reminder of how you would have gotten to a negotiation versus a situation where you have no negotiation. And so The reminder I want to give with this on screen is that it's the decisions you make not here in awarding the contract, or not in the last module even of evaluating the bids, or before that even in preparing the tender package, that leads to that choice of negotiation versus non-negotiation. But instead it's the choice you make way back in project delivery and in strategy for tendering that really impacts whether you're going to have the ability to negotiate here or not. So make sure in those early stages that you really understand the project that you're taking on. Usually, even after a letter of acceptance, there's a series of housekeeping steps that need to be taken with the successful bidder, who at this point we should probably start calling your contractor. And these housekeeping steps are just the submission of a series of documents that may be required by the funder, or they're probably just things you want to have from a liability perspective that will allow you to move to signing contracts. This set of standard documents has already been outlined in the tender package, so nothing should be a surprise to the contractor here, and they should be easy to produce. And on the screen now I have an example. We have examples of some of the most common post-submission documents. There's things like builder's insurance packages, safety certifications, performance surety, workers' compensation. These are all really standard in the industry, and so your contractor shouldn't have any trouble producing them, but do make sure that you receive all of these documents before you move to contract, or else this liability might rest with you. And now we've done it. We've gotten to the point where you should be signing a contract. And I think one of the misconceptions here is that the contract document itself is going to be a whole novel new process. But it's not. The contract should follow directly from your tender package, restating much of the information that was in there, now filled in with the dollar amounts and some of the specifics that the contractor has offered to you in their bid. You shouldn't be worrying about anything here. This isn't about creating new content. Instead, your role is making sure that you get the signatures in the right order and that signed copies of the contract are filed with the appropriate personnel. And you've done it. You've basically completed the tendering process and you're ready to build. But wait, the module's not done and this course isn't over yet. So there must still be other things to do. The first of those things I want to talk about is notifying unsuccessful bidders. This is something you want to do after the contract has been signed. And again, you want to do it with a formal letter. And for those unsuccessful bidders, this is part of closing out their bid process. Also, as a part of this process, you're going to return their bid securities and let them know who the successful bidder was. The part I want to focus on in here is that it's best practice to offer all unsuccessful bidders the opportunity for a debrief. It's a discussion about why they were unsuccessful. Your aim in an open competitive tendering and procurement process was to have the maximum number and highest quality bids possible. Offering a debrief to unsuccessful bidders and having a frank and constructive conversation is one way to not alienate unsuccessful bidders and risk getting fewer and lower quality bids on your next project. Throughout tendering and procurement, you should have an eye on your future projects, noting and evaluating what's working with your process and ensuring that you aren't limiting your bidder pool for the future by not having a simple conversation that can mean a lot to that unsuccessful bidder. And a final note, for the rare case when the successful bidder refuses to sign a contract within the acceptance period, you have a couple of options for what's next. You can return to your next 3 highest ranking bidders and ask them to rebid, or you can basically start your process again. Note that I say return to your next 3 and ask them to rebid, and that's often because By the time the acceptance period has expired, which is when you find that your successful bidder won't be signing a contract, the previous bids that were submitted have expired, and the contractors no longer, or the bidders no longer, have to honor the prices that were in those bids. And so you are in, unfortunately, a rebid situation. Well, in this module, hopefully you've had the opportunity to share good news with one of your bidders, and then once receiving the post-bid submissions, move into contract signing and really wrap up the meat of the tendering and procurement process. You've reached out to your unsuccessful bidders and, where desired, had a conversation about why it didn't work out for them this time, hoping to maintain the possibility of a future relationship. And we've learned what happens in the rare case where your successful bidder doesn't sign a contract. As always, though, if you'd like to learn anything more about what happened in this module, the references are on screen now. Thank you.